Imagine a financial ecosystem that moves as one, where AI, blockchain, and other advanced technologies streamline processing, where trade settled with certainty. DTCC makes it possible by purposefully innovating for the global markets. Faster, smarter, more connected. Markets are evolving. We help you access new opportunities so you can grow. The future isn't far away. We're building it today. DTCC, Financial Markets Forward.
Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 3805 AM. Today's date is December 28th, 2025, and the title of the episode is China Begins to Restrict Silver. The central bank fraud comes into focus. Tick tock. Let's talk about protecting our wealth. Retirement is getting harder to reach. Inflation and currency devaluation are eating away at our savings every year. That's why smart investors are turning to Bitcoin, not as a gamble, but as a global hedge backed by major funds, banks, and even government quietly stacking digital assets. After reaching an all-time high of 124,000 in October, Bitcoin has pulled back. Many see this as a perfect opportunity to invest before the next uptrend. When you invest with My Digital Money, you get US-based support and secure offline storage, so your crypto stays protected. You can even open a crypto IRA or roll over your existing 401k to enjoy valuable tax benefits. Don't let inflation steal your future. Protect and grow your digital assets today with MyDigitalMoney.com. MyDigitalMoney.com, smarter investing, safer storage, and better path to retirement. Let's get right into the economic collapse financial news. Now, the deep state, the corrupt politicians, the private West Central Bank, the World Economic Forum. You could see the deep state players, the central bankers right now, they're panicking like we've never seen before. Because I do believe they see Trump's strategy right now. They see where all of this is headed. And what's very interesting about all of this is, number one, we're starting to see all the fraud come out of Minnesota, California, many other places. Remember, when you look at the central bank system, it's one gigantic money laundering system. When you think of the debt where it's 36 trillion, is the debt really 36 trillion? Have we really used 36 trillion to help this country that we really needed to borrow this money to improve the infrastructure? Or was this all done via criminal activity? And I do believe the answer is going to be it was done through criminal activity. And I think the people are going to be very, very shocked in the end when they find out what's really going on. And they're going to realize that it's all because of the central bank system. Because again, where does all the money come from? It doesn't come from the government. It comes from a central bank, which is an open-ended credit card. And those criminals within the government, they keep borrowing and borrowing and borrowing. And I do believe this is why Trump has started the tariff system, because again, he needed a system that was going to compete with the criminal system. And actually, in the end, the system that he's building right now is going to overshadow the criminal system, because once the criminal system is exposed, the people are going to go, okay, what do we do now? And I do believe Trump is going to be building the case to remove the central bank with what is going on in this country. And you can see that China right now, they realize that the entire system is about to change, and they decided to restrict silver. Now, they might be doing this because, again, you need silver for electronics, you need silver for solar panels, you need silver for batteries, you need silver for pretty much everything. So I do believe they're going to try to put a lot of pressure on the world. But again, why else are they restricting silver? And think about it. Since they've been restricting silver, what has been happening? The silver price has been going up. But we'll have to see how that all turns out in the end, and we'll have to see where all this goes. But when you start to look at the entire world, you could see that countries aren't actually dumping the Federal Reserve note. What they're actually doing is they're diversifying into non-traditional reserve currencies, which is very, very interesting. They're still holding the Federal Reserve note. They're just not taking on more of it. What they're doing is they're keeping what they have right now, and they're actually moving into non-traditional reserve currency. So the share of U.S. dollar denominated assets held by other central banks dropped by 56.9% of total foreign exchange reserves in the third quarter, the lowest since 1994, from 57.1% in the second quarter to 58.5% in the first quarter. U.S. dollar denominated foreign exchange reserves include U.S. Treasury securities, U.S. mortgage backed securities, U.S. agency securities, U.S. corporate bonds, and other U.S. dollar denominated assets held by central banks other than the Fed. Excluded are any central bank's assets denominated in its own currency, such as the Fed's Treasury securities or the ECB's euro denominated securities. So it's not that foreign central banks dumped U.S. dollar denominated assets such as Treasury securities. They didn't. They added a little to their holdings, but they added more assets denominated in other currency, particularly a gaggle of smaller currencies whose combined share has surged, while central bank holdings of U.S. dollar denominated assets haven't changed much for a decade. And so the percentage share of those U.S. dollar assets continue to decline. And here are the central bank holdings right now of foreign exchange reserves in all currencies. So you have US dollar assets, 7.4 trillion, euro assets in euros, 2.65 trillion, yen assets in yen, 0.76 trillion, British pound assets, 0.58 trillion, Canadian dollar assets, 0.35 trillion, Australian dollar assets, 0.27 trillion, and Chinese renminbi, which is 0.25 trillion. So you could see how this is all going. And what they're really doing right now is they're not just dumping it. They're actually just bringing on other currencies. Because once again, I do believe what's happening right now is we're going to be shifting into sound money. And a lot of the countries are going to be going back to gold, going back to silver. And I do believe this is why the central banks are ramping up on other currencies. But we'll have to see how this all plays out. But you can see the economy right now. It is growing, and it's growing a lot faster than Biden's economy because, again, Biden / Obama plus, the Federal Reserve, the central bank, deep state players, they were in the process of destroying the economy, and Trump is in the process of making the economy great again. So when you look at Biden's information and you see his job numbers, you see inflation, you see fuel costs, you see GDP, you can see those were completely out of whack compared to Trump. Trump is doing the opposite of what the central bank and Biden / Obama was doing. And Trump, he put this out on Truth. He said Trump's 79% increase in GDP growth rate, 5 ways he did it. And it shows Biden at 2.4% and Trump at 4.3%. Again, he brought investment back. He started the tariff system. Inflation, he brought down. Fuel prices, he brought down. So you could see he's doing quite a bit right now. And actually, Biden was doing the opposite. And I don't think it was that difficult to actually make the economy look pretty darn good, even though he's playing within the central bank illusionary economy. I do believe in the end we'll be breaking out of this, and we're going to see the economy really start to change. And I do believe across the globe, you could see the central bankers, the deep state players, they're preparing for a new system. And I do believe when you look at China and you look at many other countries, you can see that they most likely are preparing. Bull Theory put this out and said silver prices are exploding due to a severe global supply shortage. The physical market can no longer meet soaring demand. And here's what's actually going on. China is changing the rules. Starting January 1st, 2026, China will restrict silver exports. To export silver, companies will now need government licenses. Only large state-approved firms qualify. At least 80 tons of annual production, around 30 million in credit lines. This effectively blocks small and mid-sized exporters. China controls roughly 60 to 70% of global silver supply. When China tightens exports, global supply drops immediately. This is the same tactics China used with rare earth minerals. The silver market was already short supply. Silver has been in a structural deficit for five straight years. That means demand is higher than supply every single year. For 2025, global demand, 1.24 billion ounces. Global supply, 1.01 billion ounces. That is a gap of 100 to 250 million ounces, and this gap is expected to get worse after China's exports limits. Mining supply is not growing. Silver mining is mostly a byproduct of copper and zinc mining. New mines take 10 plus years to build. Ore quality is falling. Recycling is not enough to fill the gap. There is no quick fix here. 3, physical silver inventories are collapsing. This is where it gets serious. COMEX inventories are down 70% since 2020. London Vault are down 40%. Shanghai inventories are at 10-year lows. At current demand, some regions hold only 30 to 45 days of usable silver. This is why physical premiums are exploding. In Shanghai, physical silver trades at 80 plus ounces. Actually, I think it hit over 90 now. COMEX prices are much lower. The price gap means buyers are paying extra just to get real silver. Paper silver is completely disconnected from reality. There is an extreme imbalance between paper silver and real silver. The paper to physical ratio is around 356 to 1. That means for every 1 ounce of real silver, there are hundreds of paper claims. If even a small percentage of buyers ask for real delivery, the system breaks. Markets understand this. This is why the price moves are becoming vertical. Industrial demand keeps rising. Silver is not just a safe haven metal. It's critical for solar panels, electrical vehicles, electronics, medical devices. Industrial use now makes up 50 to 60% of total silver demand. There is no substitute for silver in many of these uses. Banks and institutions are reacting. Supply limits, physical shortages, paper market risk. Silver is not rallying because of fear. It is rallying because a real supply squeeze is playing out in real time. And really think about this. Why would they be hoarding the silver right now? Are they panicking a little bit? Do they see what's happening in the market? Again, silver is real money. Yes, it's used for other things. It's the same thing with gold. It's real money compared to the paper currency. Elon Musk responded to all this and said, this is not good. Silver is needed in many industrial processes. So right now, we can see Trump and team, what they're doing is they're starting the rare earth mines. Now, we've all seen the headlines that talk about Ozempic and similar miracle weight loss shots. But what most people don't realize is this. A major analysis just found out that people who stop taking these weight loss injections gain nearly all their weight back within a year. That's the catch. These drugs only work while you're on them. They're expensive, and the moment you stop, your body fights back. This is why I like BioTrust GLP-1 Elevate. And everyone is obsessed with the weight management results I've seen with it. It helps my body naturally trigger the same hunger-controlling, craving-reducing signals that Ozempic would, but without needles, prescriptions, or the scary side effects. It also promotes fullness, helps reduce hunger hormones, supports fat loss instead of muscle loss, and helps maintain healthy blood sugar levels. For a limited time, you can grab a bag of BioTrust GLP-1 Elevate for 40% off only at trimwithx22.com. Plus, you'll also receive a 60-day satisfaction guarantee and free express shipping on subscriptions. Once again, go to trimwithx22.com to get this deal now, or just click the link in the description. Building these out. And yes, this is all going to also include silver. And I do believe we're going to see silver really start to move up. And think about it. I think the gap between gold and silver is going to start to close. I do believe we're going to see gold and silver start to really move in a direction that I don't think anyone ever thought possible. And I do believe this is going to give Trump and the Patriots ammunition to actually use it against the central bank system. Because once again, I think this is showing the world the real value of the fiat currency in the end. And I think that's what people are going to start to realize. And when you look at the price change in 2025 for all the metals, and by the way, Election Wizard put this out, platinum is up 180%, silver is up 174%, gold is up 72%, lithium is up 49%, copper is up 45%. I mean, I think this should tell you everything you need to know. And when you look at the entire central bank system, I think what people are starting to learn is that the central bank system creates fraud. It creates money laundering. It creates a criminal syndicate in this country. And as the deep state players, the criminals, continually borrow this money and use it for their own nefarious needs, it's not going to the people. It's not helping the infrastructure. It's not helping anything in this country. And I think what's happening right now with all this money that's in circulation, which is causing the inflation, I think people are starting to realize that, wait a minute, what is causing all this? Why do we have these problems? Think about it. All these problems, when you look across the globe, when you look at hunger, when you look at the poverty level, when you look at the terrorist funding, when you look at the drug trade, when you look at the fraud, the money laundering that's happening in California, Minnesota, and basically across the world, I would say we could sum this up that this is one gigantic criminal syndicate, which they are now laundering about $30 trillion. And this has nothing to do with we, the people. It all goes to them. And basically, they just enslaved us to the system to pay for their criminal enterprise. And what's very interesting is Election Wizard put out a post on X, and it's a simple question. The annual U.S. federal budget is around $7 trillion in total spending. Of that amount, how much do you believe is stolen and lost to fraud and waste? And it's a survey. Less than 200 billion, 200 to 500 billion, 500 billion to 1 trillion, over 1 trillion. 73% say over 1 trillion. Now, I would say it's way, way over 1 trillion. I think people are going to be absolutely shocked and surprised when we come to learn that the debt that we have today, that's 37, 38 trillion, around that number. I think people are going to be surprised that most likely we have about 25 or maybe even 30 trillion that was via fraud. And we haven't even looked into the Federal Reserve and what they have been doing behind the scenes. So once again, I think people are going to be absolutely shocked. And this tells you everything you need to know. Why do we have all this fraud? Why do we have an economy like this? Why is Trump building a tariff system? It all comes down to one thing. Because he's prepared and ready to get rid of this system that has enslaved us since the beginning. And it's gotten worse and worse as time gone on. And I do believe that people, as they're seeing all this play out, they're going to start to realize it's time to remove the central bank system. And again, sometimes you just can't tell the people this. You got to really show them. And without people seeing the NGOs, without people seeing the shell companies, without people seeing the fraud in Minnesota, California, Ohio, and many, many other states and across the world, people wouldn't believe it. People wouldn't understand it, because a lot of people say, well, if we get rid of the central bank and we get rid of all of this, and states and towns and cities can't borrow, how are they going to function? Well, I'm going to tell you, probably less than 10% is the actual money that they actually need. The other 90%, I don't even think they understand where that even goes, because you know why? It's being laundered, kickbacks, you name it. So do you really need that much to keep everything operational? No, you don't. But again, they've been tricking the people of this country for a very, very long time. And I think people are starting to realize what's going on. And this is why Trump created the tariff system. The tariff system competes with the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is a debt-based system. The Federal Reserve creates currency out of thin air, and we, the people, borrow it with interest attached. It's not our currency. We're borrowing. They're letting us use it. And since you're using it, you have to pay interest on this currency. Plus, they tax you to get that interest back. Plus, as the fraud continually happens, there's another tax, which is called inflation, which is the devaluation of the currency. So Trump said, okay, let's build a system that competes with the Federal Reserve, and that is the tariff system. The tariff system is not a debt system. The tariff system takes in currency that's already in existence. The tariff system adds to this country. And presidents before Trump, they have used this multiple times, and the country has become very, very wealthy. Trump, he put this out on Truth, and he said the following: tariffs are creating great wealth and unprecedented national security for the USA. Trade deficit has been cut by 60%, totally unheard of. 4.3% GDP and going way up. No inflation. We are expected as a country again. And yes, we're going to see Trump's system that he's building, I call the parallel economic system, that is going to actually mitigate inflation. You have to remember, he's still, even though he's building this tariff system, it's still in the framework of the central bank system. So he has a system within a central bank system. So basically, the system that he's building is helping to mitigate what the central bank has caused right now. Do we feel the full power of the tariff system? No, we don't, because you really can't have the central bank and the tariff system working side by side. It just doesn't work. So I do believe as time goes on and the tariff system gets bigger and we start weaning ourselves off the Federal Reserve, which means we're not going to borrow the currency because we have the currency coming in via tariffs. And again, Congress has to specify where this money is going to go. So do you think Congress is going to do it now, or do we need to get control of the House and the Senate? Well, I do believe we need to get control of the House and Senate. So what is Trump going to do? Well, it seems like he's timed everything for the 2026 midterm election. And with the one big, beautiful bill, we're going to see refunds. We're going to see fuel prices come way down. We're going to see dividends, and we're going to see something that we've never seen before. And people are going to see lower interest rates. We're going to see housing sales boom. We're going to see car sales boom. We're going to see automobile manufacturers start to boom. We're going to see manufacturing in this country start to boom. and people are going to feel happier and happier and happier. And as people get happier and they feel at ease because the economy is in their favor, well, they don't want it to end. And if they decide to vote for the Democrats, it will end immediately because, again, they're going to go up against everything that Trump is trying to do. And all you got to do is look at the blue cities compared to the red cities, or the blue states versus the red states. People are going to see this very, very clearly in the year 2026 because those blue states are going to be following what? The Green New Scam, the D's agenda. The red states are going to do the opposite. So people are going to see a very, very big difference. And the people are going to say, well, we don't want any of that. We want more of this because this is giving me more money. The fuel prices are much, much cheaper in the red states. There are more jobs in the red states. And once again, people are going to see a very, very big difference. So I do believe moving through 2026, everything is going to start to ramp up. More of the central bank system is going to be exposed. The fraud's going to be exposed, which is going to lead all the way back to the central bank system. And as we stop borrowing from the central bank, the system's going to improve dramatically because we're going to be using the currency from the tariff system to fund a lot of the government. And as Trump continually cuts the government, it's just going to get better and better as time goes on. And I do believe in the end, what we're going to see is we're going to see gold, we're going to see silver, and yes, we're going to see Bitcoin. They're going to start to move up and they're going to make some incredible moves. I think gold and silver really have to catch up to Bitcoin right now. I know people say, oh, look, Bitcoin has come down. Really? Let's see. It's pegged to the dollar. So when you really look at it, $88,000, $90,000 to buy a Bitcoin. So you need 90,000 of those pieces of paper, the fiat currency, to buy one Bitcoin. Right now, you need something like 4,500 pieces of paper to buy 1 ounce of gold. So as of right now, you could see the alternative currency. It is now showing you the true value of the fiat currency. And yes, as time goes on and is more exposed, well, guess what's going to happen? You're going to see everything start to move up, especially with countries right now. They're going to start hoarding silver, hoarding gold, hoarding copper, because that is the real money. I mean, copper, yes, it just goes along with it. Platinum too. But you're going to see them say, oh, we're not getting rid of that. We rather use our paper currency right now. And you're going to see that gold, platinum, silver, copper, they're really going to start to move. And I think the central bank days, they are numbered right now. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take these complex, really densely researched topics and try to distill them into the essential knowledge you need.
And today's stack of source material is?
Yeah.
It's really something else.
It really is. Our mission today is a deep dive into the world of precious metals, specifically silver. And we're being guided by the really compelling analysis of Mike Maloney.
Right, we're unpacking his core thesis.
Yeah, and that thesis is that silver should no longer be viewed as, a simple investment, but rather as a rapidly vanishing strategic metal that's caught in, well, what he calls a profound supply crisis.
It's a fascinating frame, and what immediately stands out is just how high stakes it is. Maloney positions gold and silver not just as, assets on a balance sheet,
right,
but as this sophisticated form of wealth transference insurance.
Wealth transference insurance. We really need to dig into what that means.
Absolutely. Our goal is to dissect that exact concept, to understand what precisely is being transferred and from who to who.
And why silver specifically offers this massive potential leverage play in that whole transition.
A leverage play driven by two things, right?
Yeah.
On one hand, it's indispensable for technology.
And on the other, its current valuation compared to gold is, deeply illogical.
Exactly. The core hook here isn't just someone calling for a price jump.
No, it's about connecting the dots.
Yeah, between finance, industry, and crucially, geopolitics.
We are talking about why silver is now critical to what the sources call technological warfare.
A very powerful term.
It is. And why its gold to silver ratio, a number we absolutely must unpack in detail, makes no sense at all, given, the state of global inventories.
So this is really a story about structural scarcity meeting a potential financial reckoning.
Perfectly put. So let's start at the foundational level, because to really appreciate the silver opportunity, you first have to get your head around the macroeconomic philosophy that underpins Maloney's entire strategy.
Okay, let's do it.
So Maloney's analysis, it really begins with this profound, and I'll admit, a somewhat frightening belief about what happens during massive financial crises.
Yeah, especially crises that involve currency devaluation,
He argues that during these periods, wealth is not actually destroyed.
which is what most people think happens.
Exactly. He says it's merely transferred.
And that distinction is it's paramount. It's everything.
Explain that.
Well, when a currency crisis hits or when an asset bubble bursts, the total volume of economic activity might shrink, but the underlying purchasing power that was represented by all those inflated dollars, it doesn't just vanish into thin air.
It has to go somewhere.
It shifts, it moves.
Yeah.
And if you're positioned correctly, say, holding sound, tangible assets, you aren't the victim of the collapse.
You're on the receiving end.
You are positioned on the receiving end of that transfer of purchasing power.
And he's seeing the writing on the wall again now.
Oh, absolutely. The sources note that he views the current markets, stocks, bonds, real estate as showing every classic sign of what he calls hyperbubbles.
Hyperbubbles.
Perhaps even larger and more fragile than the ones that we saw right before 2008.
So this environment we're in now is just dominated by unprecedented debt levels,
Mhm.
central bank liquidity operations, asset inflation across the board.
It creates this incredibly precarious structure. So Maloney views a significant market correction not as a possibility, but as a probability. It's just baked into the system.
And he even puts a timeline on it, which I found interesting. It gives the whole strategy a sense of urgency.
He does. He predicts a major correction, a significant destabilizing financial event, potentially hitting by the end of 2026 or maybe into 2027.
What's that based on? Is it just cycles, or is there something more specific?
It seems to stem from two key areas.
Mhm.
First, you have these historical commodity cycles and debt maturity schedules. They tend to sort of coalesce into crisis points on these rough decade-long intervals.
And we're kind of overdue.
We are overdue based on the last major liquidity event. But more specifically, he's looking at the accelerating rate of currency debasement, the M2 money supply expansion,
Okay.
and the historical relationship between those liquidity injections and when asset prices peak.
Hmm.
The sources suggest that the rapid M2 expansion we saw post-2020 has pushed assets to these peak speculative levels.
Then what goes up?
Corrections typically follow when you wind down these extreme inflationary environments. So that places the likely reckoning right in that 2026, 2027 window.
And this whole anticipated market correction is the backdrop. It's the stage against which precious metals, they stop being a hedge.
They become an offensive weapon.
Right. To illustrate the sheer magnitude of this wealth transference, the source material keeps coming back to this really powerful case study, the 2008 global financial crisis.
Focusing on that period between 2007 and 2011.
Yeah, and this is where you see this extraordinary divergence between traditional assets and precious metals.
Let's dig into the numbers because this is the anecdote that clarifies the entire thesis. It makes it real.
So we're comparing the trajectory of real estate, the classic store of wealth for the middle class, with gold.
Some money.
Right. During that 4-year window, the core of the crisis, traditional wealth assets were just eviscerated.
Yeah.
Real estate values, on average, across the US and many other markets, they just plummeted. They fell by about half.
So if you had a $500,000 house in 2007,
By 2011, its market value might be closer to $250,000. A massive wealth reduction, at least in dollar terms.
okay, now let's look at the counter asset, the insurance policy.
Gold.
During that exact same period, gold tripled in price.
Tripled.
It went from roughly $650 an ounce in 2007 to near $1,800 or even higher by 2011.
So gold wasn't just preserving capital.
No, it was aggressively gaining purchasing power while the dollar-denominated world was imploding around it.
Okay, so walk us through the combined effect. This is the math behind what he calls the 6 homes multiplier.
Okay, so imagine an investor who, saw the crisis coming. In 2007, they liquidate their single home. Let's use that $500,000 figure, and they convert that capital immediately into gold.
All right, simple enough.
By 2011, the crisis is past its peak. Gold has tripled. Their $500,000 position is now worth $1.5 million.
$1.5 million.
Right. At the same time, real estate values have been cut in half.
Hmm.
So that same $500,000 home now only costs $250,000 to purchase.
Okay, I see the extraordinary leverage now.
Yes.
You're selling an asset that went up 200%, the gold, and you're buying back into an asset that went down by 50%, the real estate.
That's it, exactly.
Yeah.
The sources calculate that for every one home sold and converted to gold in 2007, that investor would have been able to purchase 6 other homes just like it in 2011.
6 homes for one.
That capital was repositioned at an extraordinary advantage. The purpose of holding precious metals in this context isn't just survival.
No, it's aggressive.
It's aggressive capital restructuring right during moments of peak market volatility. It's a mechanism for catching the wealth that's pouring out of paper assets.
That 6-home calculation it's just stunning. It really forces you to redefine what portfolio insurance even means.
Yeah.
It's not this passive hedge against inflation. It's an active strategy for this incredible compounding of wealth in relative terms, right when fiat currencies are failing.
And what's also fascinating here is that Maloney views his educational work, his focus on precious metals, as something, beyond mere financial planning.
He assigns a societal mission to it.
A societal mission, yeah. Noting that his work aims to save the middle class one investor at a time.
Why that focus on the middle class specifically? I mean, beyond them being a typical investor profile, he links financial instability directly to political danger.
He does. He issues a very, very stark warning. Financial collapse and the resulting impoverishment of the middle class is the single greatest breeding ground for instability.
When people get desperate.
When a population's purchasing power is suddenly just destroyed, fear and desperation surge. And when people are scared, desperate, and feel they have nothing left to lose,
they stop thinking rationally.
Exactly. They stop thinking rationally about civic institutions, and they become vulnerable to extreme ideologies.
And he connects this directly to historical precedents.
Yes, he does. He cites figures like Hitler, Mao, Stalin, Lenin. They didn't rise in times of prosperity.
No, they rose from the ashes.
Directly out of the ashes of profound economic despair and instability, often following hyperinflationary events or massive currency crises that just wiped out the middle and lower classes.
And these leaders leveraged that desperation.
They offered charismatic but ultimately disastrous solutions.
So if we're following Maloney's viewpoint here, the health of the monetary system is fundamentally linked to the health of the political system.
100%.
Sound money, by providing a stable store of value for the average person, it acts as a stabilizing force against political extremism.
Precisely. The ability of the middle class to retain its purchasing power through assets like silver and gold makes them less likely to fall prey to the promises of dictators and despots.
So in this context, the anticipated resurgence of silver isn't just a market phenomenon.
No, it's much bigger. It's a reflection of these deeper, often painful tensions in the global financial order.
And a personal defense.
And a personal defense against the instability created by unrestrained central bank policies. It really elevates the investment thesis to one of social resilience.
That provides the necessary gravity for sure. So if that's the macroeconomic and philosophical backdrop, how does the physical reality of the silver market shift Maloney's thesis from, philosophy to a concrete strategic opportunity?
Okay.
Let's pivot now to the structural crisis that makes silver the vanishing point.
All right, this is where it gets really interesting. The shift in silver status is the first critical component of this structural crisis.
The first piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. We have to stop thinking of silver as merely a shiny investment metal. Maloney asserts it is transitioned into a mandatory strategic material.
Mandatory how? Walk us through why it's suddenly so indispensable for the 21st century economy and military.
Okay, so silver has the highest electrical and thermal conductivity of any known metal, period.
Okay.
Which makes it completely irreplaceable in modern high-tech applications.
Yeah.
It's absolutely essential for military systems, for advanced electronics, for our increasingly vast digital infrastructure, and critically, for renewable energy.
Solar panels?
Solar panels require silver paste. And think about the billions of microchips that govern everything from our cell phones to missile guidance systems. They require silver bonding wires or pastes.
So it's a material without a substitute for these really precise applications. And the sources, they really emphasize the link to modern conflict.
They do. Maloney asserts that nations are waking up to the realization that they can't conduct a regular war, a monetary war, or most critically, a technological war without robust access to silver. And given that global superpower competition today is primarily defined by technological superiority AI, quantum computing, advanced defense systems, silver is now the bottleneck material.
So the sources conclude that silver is more needed for that sector, the technological sector, than anything else.
Yeah.
This isn't just about consumer gadgets anymore. It's about national security. It's about industrial supremacy.
Exactly right. That strategic necessity in the face of scarcity, it just inherently provides a massive uplift to the price floor.
Unlike gold.
Exactly. Unlike gold, which is purely a monetary asset or used in, small amounts for decoration, silver is an industrial consumable that dictates whether a nation can maintain its technological competitiveness.
And this strategic necessity leads directly to the core geopolitical tension, which is the total depletion of strategic reserves, at least in the West.
This point needs so much more emphasis. It's an astounding oversight in hindsight.
Tell us about it.
The United States once held the world's largest strategic silver stockpile. This reserve was built up over decades, starting in the 1940s and 50s.
And the purpose was explicit.
Explicitly to ensure supply for wartime and industrial needs. It once held billions of ounces.
Billions. So what happened to that stockpile and when?
The sources detailed that the majority of those reserves were just sold off gradually. It started in the 1960s when silver was demonetized in coinage.
Right.
And it accelerated significantly into the 90s and early 2000s based on this assumption that it was just an obsolete industrial metal.
A huge
A
miscalculation.
historic one. The reserves were treated as an excess asset to be liquidated for budgetary purposes. And the result is unequivocal. Those strategic reserves are now all gone.
Well gone.
The U.S. government, once the world's largest physical holder of silver, effectively has nothing left for strategic operations.
Wow. That creates this massive self-inflicted vulnerability. And while the West was liquidating its critical reserves,
We were seeing the exact opposite strategically defensive moves from competing powers.
like China.
The sources highlight China's response as the alarm bell that should be ringing worldwide.
What are they doing?
Recognizing silver's strategic value for their own tech ambitions and military modernization, China has implemented severe restrictions.
You mean like tariffs?
No, much more serious. Things like state control flow and new license mandates to halt or restrict silver exports. This is strategic resource management. It's effectively locking down their supply.
So the message is clear. China sees its silver as a strategic asset to be hoarded, while the U.S. treated its supply like spare change.
And this geopolitical move has forced a global realization that stockpiles worldwide, not just in the U.S., have largely vanished.
So governments are now in this frantic race to secure supply, but they have to do it without causing a public panic.
Right, because they're realizing they lack the necessary reserves for any major strategic operation, whether it's a full-scale technological build-out or a military mobilization.
And that lack of reserves creates a structural vulnerability that can't be solved quickly.
It can only be solved by price.
Okay, so this shortage is then exacerbated by the fundamental difference in how silver is used compared to gold. This is what the sources call the supply trap.
Yeah, and this is what locks in the scarcity. Think about the life cycle of the two metals.
Okay.
Gold is largely stored in central banks, or it's hoarded by individuals, used in jewelry. It means it's highly accessible and recyclable.
So most of the gold ever mined is still here above ground.
Pretty much. But silver is different.
How so?
Silver, unlike gold, is often consumed permanently in its industrial applications.
What does that mean, consumed permanently?
Well, when an ounce of gold is used in a bar, it's still an ounce of gold in a bar. But when an ounce of silver is atomized into the conductive thin film of a solar panel or embedded as microsolder in a circuit board, it's dispersed.
So it's still there, technically?
Technically, but it's oxidized or rendered completely impractical and uneconomical to retrieve. The cost of reclaiming that tiny amount of silver, which is often measured in parts per million, it typically exceeds the market price of the silver itself.
So a huge percentage of the annual silver supply, I've seen estimates of well over half, is just removed from the market entirely year after year.
Because it becomes functionally unrecyclable.
That's the structural crisis.
That's it. We are moving rapidly from a historical phase where there was excess inventory being drawn down from government stockpiles and old coinage to a state of severe constrained supply.
Where new mining production just can't keep up.
It can't keep pace with permanent industrial consumption plus rising investment demand. This shortage is structural, not cyclical.
Which means it will require a massive price spike to correct.
It's the only way.
And we can see public interest rising right alongside this. The sources note that search data for buying silver is hitting record highs.
Yeah, levels last seen during the volatility of the 2008 crisis and the run-up to the 2011 peak.
It seems like the public consciousness, maybe just instinctively, is beginning to sense this turning point.
At the same time, the geopolitical supply side is clamping down. The scarcity is becoming palpable.
So when industrial necessity meets zero reserves and rising public fear about the currency,
You have the perfect setup for a price explosion.
which takes us directly to the valuation anomaly. And this is perhaps the most compelling argument that Maloney makes.
I agree.
So Maloney urges listeners to stop looking only at the dollar price of silver.
Yeah, he says that's a distraction.
Instead, you should focus on what he calls the silver opportunity chart, which is the gold to silver ratio, or the GSR.
The GSR is simply the number of ounces of silver required to purchase a single ounce of gold. It's a measure of relative valuation between the two main precious metals.
And Maloney views this ratio as the most revealing long-term indicator of market imbalance and the true opportunity.
Right. And as of the source material's recent data, this was for December 2025, the ratio is sitting just below 65 to 1.
64.54 to 1, to be exact. And the ratio itself, Maloney argues, makes no sense at all.
And that's because, given the geopolitical context we just covered, the vanishing stockpiles, the strategic necessity, the permanent industrial consumption, that current ratio is historically outlandish.
What do you mean?
A high ratio means that silver is trading at a significant, profound discount relative to gold. If that ratio corrects, silver must appreciate much faster than gold.
Okay, but what's the counter argument? Why is the ratio so high right now if the physical fundamentals are so strong?
The common counter argument is a mix of market inertia and manipulation.
The paper market.
The paper market. Silver has a smaller market cap and is frequently used as a paper trading instrument on exchanges like the COMEX. Critics argue that this paper market continually suppresses the price, which keeps the ratio artificially inflated.
But Maloney's view is different.
His view is that while this suppression exists, physical scarcity will ultimately trump the paper prices. It will force the ratio to revert, not just to historical norms, but eventually to a point that reflects today's industrial reality.
So let's ground this 65 to 1 ratio in some history. What did this ratio look like when the market was, fundamentally sounder?
Back when silver was widely available and it wasn't facing a consumption crisis.
Yeah.
Okay, so during the 1970s bull market, which saw significant inflation and commodity price increases, the average sort of normal ratio was considered to be between 33 to 1 and 35 to 1.
That's nearly half of what it is today.
Nearly half. And crucially, that was a time when government stockpiles were enormous and readily available to meet any demand.
Okay, so let me just reiterate that. In a healthy supply-rich market, silver was twice as valuable relative to gold as it is today.
That's right.
And today, with zero strategic supply and massive industrial demand, the ratio is stuck up at 65 to 1.
It really highlights the anomaly, doesn't it?
It does. And if we look at the extremes,
The correction in the 1980 peak, which was driven by the Hunt brothers' attempt to corner the market, saw the ratio drop sharply all the way down to 14 to 1 in January of 1980.
14 to 1.
And that was the market violently reflecting what was just a temporary scarcity.
So Maloney's prediction is bold. He believes the ratio is destined for this range again. He expects a correction that takes it below 20 to 1.
And given the structural constraints we talked about, he believes it could potentially even reach 10 to 1.
But how can he be so confident in a number like 10 to 1? That seems extreme.
It connects back to the consumption data and also geology.
Okay.
Historically, the geological ratio of silver to gold in the Earth's crust is estimated at around 17 to 1. The current mining ratio is also generally closer to 8 or 9 to 1.
More silver comes out of the ground than gold.
Right. But Maloney argues that if the supply is now structurally constrained because of that permanent industrial consumption, the market price has to eventually reflect this operational reality, especially when monetary demand surges.
So the logic is,
If the 1970s average was 35 to 1 with a massive surplus, then a ratio of 10 or 15 to 1 is logically defensible now that the surplus is gone and the strategic demand is at an all-time high.
so the real trade isn't betting on general inflation. It's betting on the historical abnormality of the ratio itself.
That's the core distinction.
Hmm.
And that brings us to the leverage aspect. Focusing on the ratio lets you maximize your purchasing power by trading between the two metals.
Right, ratio trading.
Exactly.
So if the ratio does contract that dramatically, what's the sheer multiplier effect for the silver investor?
Okay, let's just run the numbers.
Mhm.
Assume the ratio moves from the current 65 to 1 down to Maloney's predicted 10 to 1.
Okay.
The silver investor, just by holding silver now instead of gold, would see their asset appreciate approximately 6.5 times faster than gold, purely from the ratio contraction.
6.5 times the outperformance. That is pure structural leverage.
It is. And remember, this is before we even factor in the rising dollar price of gold itself.
Which is also expected to appreciate because of all the currency debasement we discussed earlier.
Precisely. Maloney suggests that even if gold only manages to double in price, which is a conservative estimate given the M2 supply explosion, the ratio correcting could lead to silver seeing 9 times the gains against the dollar.
9 times.
That's the combined power. Sound money appreciation, which is driven by currency fear, coupled with leverage, which is driven by the ratio correction and scarcity.
So this ratio, then, it's not just an indicator. It's the core mechanism for Maloney's personal trading strategy.
Yeah, a strategy designed not to time the peak, but to manage the accumulation and distribution phases.
Walk us through his specific plan.
His approach is designed to be counter-emotional and systematic. When the ratio is high specifically, anything over 70 to 1, that signals that silver is extremely cheap relative to gold.
Okay.
The strategy dictates buying all silver. This is the maximum opportunity signal. Accumulate the most ounces you can.
And what about when silver starts to catch?
As the ratio drops, maybe it moves toward 40 to 1, that signifies silver's value is catching up to gold's. The investor then begins adding gold to the position, diversifying back into the broader, deeper monetary asset.
Okay. And then the final phase.
Eventually, when the ratio hits its lower extremes, that 10 to 1 or 15 to 1 target, the strategy shifts to buying all gold with the now highly appreciated silver.
So you trade your scarce asset for the foundational asset.
Preparing for the next divergence or accumulation cycle, it's a brilliant way to continuously maximize the amount of precious metal you own, regardless of the dollar price.
And he also provides a specific tactical buying mechanism for dips, right?
He does. He encourages buying the panic, not selling into it. Maloney notes that the 200-day moving average acts as a historically strong buying opportunity, particularly if the price falls by 20% or more during these market dips.
So when the market is scared and dumping silver,
that's the moment to employ the strategy and load up, knowing you are accumulating a deeply undervalued, strategically constrained asset.
Okay, so with the structural scarcity and the ratio leverage established, let's talk absolute price targets.
The big numbers.
The big numbers. Maloney has asserted for years that silver is destined for triple digits, over $100 an ounce.
And he's provided a definitive timeline for that initial surge, highlighting 2026 or 2027 as the likely years for these triple-digit prices to be realized.
Which coincides precisely with the predicted market correction timeline we discussed earlier.
It does. It suggests that the flight to safety will be what ignites the ratio contraction.
But the relentless stream of new scarcity data, the confirmation of zero strategic reserves, the tightening geopolitical chokehold on exports, it's changing his long-held view.
It is. The sources mention he is beginning to consider a much more extreme outcome.
Which is?
He admits he is beginning to consider that quadruple digits, over $1,000 an ounce, are possible.
$1,000. To many, that's going to sound like hyperbole.
It does, but it requires us to connect price to currency volume.
This brings us to the M2 money supply adjustment. This is a critical technical point that needs some clarification.
Okay.
Why M2, and what does this 11.8 times multiplier mean?
So M2, it tracks the total supply of liquid money cash, checking deposits, savings deposits, money market funds.
Basically all of the currency sloshing around.
It represents the total volume of currency circulating that could potentially chase assets. So when we adjust the historical high price of silver, which was around $50 in 1980 for the subsequent explosion in the M2 money supply, we can calculate its true inflation-adjusted value against the currency pool.
And what does that calculation reveal?
The source notes that adjusted for the M2 money supply, silver is currently 11.8 times away from its inflation-adjusted all-time high.
11.8 times. What does that mean in practical terms?
In practical terms, it means that even if the U.S. dollar's purchasing power merely reverts to its historical relationship with silver, based on the volume of currency created since 1980, silver's price would need to appreciate nearly 12-fold just to catch up.
So if silver hits a new nominal high, it would need a massive appreciation just to reach its old relative purchasing power.
A 1,200% move is an enormous room for growth, and that's before you even factor in the new non-existent supply constraints.
Right. And this inflation context is why he has also revised his expectation for gold.
Believing that $8,000 an ounce is starting to sound a little bit low.
And if gold achieves that, and the ratio contracts to 10-1.
The math easily supports the quadruple-digit potential for silver.
So the actual catalyst that will force the price from triple-digit expectations into quadruple-digit reality is, according to Maloney, the inevitable failure of the paper market.
The physical delivery crisis.
Right.
This is where the structural scarcity becomes visible and undeniable. The global price of silver is largely set by futures contracts traded on exchanges like the COMEX, the paper market.
Okay.
And this market relies entirely on the assumption that only a tiny fraction of contract holders will ever demand physical delivery.
An assumption that allows institutions to sell massive amounts of paper silver,
effectively suppressing the price.
Yeah. So what happens when that scarcity finally hits the floor?
When supply constraints become extreme, when U.S. stockpiles are zero, China is locking down exports, the paper market's ability to suppress prices just crumbles.
How?
If a significant number of large buyers, or even a coordinated group of mid-sized buyers, begin demanding physical delivery, the exchanges cannot fulfill their obligations at the current low paper price.
The sources refer to this as a modern-day Hunt Brothers scenario, but on a global scale. Explain that metaphor for us.
The original Hunt brothers tried to corner the physical market back in 1980.
Right.
Maloney now speculates on what happens if multiple large entities, he likens it to 100 Hunt brothers in the U.S., 100 in China, and 100 from the rest of the world, all attempt to take physical delivery simultaneously.
And this doesn't mean collusion.
Not at all. It just means disparate major financial entities, sovereign wealth funds, or big industrial users, all trying to secure physical supply at the exact same time.
What's Maloney's conclusion when that synchronized demand finally hits the market?
His conclusion is stark and singular. They can't.
They can't deliver.
There is simply not enough physical metal available in the vaults to satisfy that kind of demand, particularly at current price levels.
So what happens then?
When the exchanges cannot deliver the physical metal, the short sellers, the ones who sold paper contracts they don't have the silver to back, are forced into a terrifying position. They have to buy the physical metal at any price necessary to cover their positions and avoid default. This sudden, non-price sensitive demand is what breaks the paper market entirely.
And triggers the vertical price spike.
The one that forces prices into the quadruple digits.
That is the ultimate mechanism of transference. The wealth is transferred from those holding paper claims to those who already own the physical asset.
And to map this inevitable supply shock, Maloney has coined this specialized vocabulary, outlining two distinct phases of extreme market scarcity.
Okay, the first phase he calls unobtainium.
Unobtainium. This is the functional phase of the crisis. This is the point where silver becomes nearly impossible to acquire physically, even if you have the dollars.
It's just not for sale.
Demand has dramatically outstripped the visible physical supply, and dealers or exchanges simply cannot source the metal in volume. This is the period where the large-scale physical buyers, sovereign funds, mints begin scrambling, which itself signals the market's terminal vulnerability.
And what follows unobtainium?
The final, more extreme phase is unaffordium. This is the conclusion of the price crisis,
where the cost is forced so high
that it achieves the only necessary correction. It must rise high enough to incentivize the long-term current physical holders to finally sell. It turns the metal into unaffordium for the average buyer and potentially even for many industrial users.
So it's effectively rationing the metal by price.
Precisely. And that moment, when the price reflects the true structural necessity and shortage making it unaffordable for most, that is likely the time to sell.
Okay, execute the wealth transfer cycle.
And redeploy that massive purchasing power back into deeply depressed traditional assets. Maybe repeating that 6 homes scenario on an even grander scale.
Okay, so to synthesize this, this really profound deep dive into Mike Maloney's thesis, the silver story is driven not by one, but by 3 powerful interconnected factors.
And they create this unique leverage against financial uncertainty.
First, we have the structural scarcity. That's due to permanent industrial consumption. Unlike gold, silver is constantly being consumed and removed from circulation,
guaranteeing a tightening supply. Second, the geopolitical locking down of that supply. evidenced by the vanishing U.S. strategic stockpile and the active state-mandated export restrictions from China.
Which confirms the strategic nature of the shortage.
And finally, the historical anomaly of the gold to silver ratio, which currently sits at that illogical 65-to-1.
And that anomaly provides the massive potential leverage, ensuring that silver will outperform gold dramatically as the ratio contracts back toward its physical and historical norms.
So silver's value proposition is uniquely powered by both currency debasement, like gold, and technological necessity, which is what creates that significant multiplier effect.
Maloney's analysis paints a very clear picture. Precious metals are wealth transference insurance in a time of hyperbubbles.
And silver, because of its strategic rarity and industrial consumption, offers the greatest potential gains.
The transition he describes, from unobtainium to unaffordium, suggests we are entering a phase where the market mechanism itself must break via a physical delivery crisis to accurately price the metal against its genuine strategic worth.
So if silver is truly indispensable for technological warfare, which is the core global conflict of the modern era, and global strategic reserves are confirmed to be gone, we have to contemplate the deeper and potentially irreversible geopolitical and military implications of this impending price crisis.
Okay, so if the market moves from unobtainium to unaffordium, forcing prices into the triple or even quadruple digits, the metal effectively becomes a national resource.
Only affordable by central banks or sovereign entities with massive currency reserves.
So what does that scarcity mean for smaller nations or for smaller corporations that rely on cutting-edge technology?
Will this price surge create a permanent technological and military divide between the wealthy nations who can afford the unaffordium and those who are permanently locked out of the advanced technological future?
That is a truly powerful question for you to consider as you digest this information.
What it really comes down to is not so much what is the price of silver, because we're talking about Federal Reserve notes. We're talking about a debt instrument. So 65 debt instruments it takes to buy an ounce of silver, and 4,300 debt instruments it takes to buy an ounce of gold. It's not going to be so much what is the price, what is the availability, can you still get it?
Hello, Robert Cusack, Rich Dad Radio Show, broadcasting from Phoenix, Arizona. It was either heaven or hell, and today it's heaven. Like best weather in the world. A very special show today because there's a lot of controversy on the issue of, the dollar, which is fake. Then you have crypto, Bitcoin and Ethereum. And I think there's 2,500 cryptos now. And then gold and silver. So I have Jim Clark is one of my guests today. We've been friends for a long time. For full disclosure, I buy gold and silver from Jim. Of course, it's right down the street from me. And Damon Jones also work together. But it's a very important show because there's another guy called Peter Schiff, who's a friend of mine. And Schiff's always trashing Bitcoin. And as you know, Trump is a Bitcoin president. His two sons, Don Jr. and Eric, were friends of mine. They made $1 billion in crypto. Not that they need the money, but they're very good business people. So stay tuned because you're going to hear the pros and cons from let's say the gold and silver side versus the crypto side. And for full disclosures, I have both. I don't discriminate between what makes me money. I'm quite happy with it. Just do it legal, ethically, and morally, and pay your taxes. So, Jim, welcome to the show.
Well, it's great to be here again with you, Robert. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you. And then Damon, thanks for being on the program.
Thanks, Robert. Great to be here.
Let's start with Damon. What's your background? How come you work for gold and silver? I mean, why would you work for this ancient pile of rock?
Well, it's interesting. My background out of college, I became a foreign currency trader. So when I was a foreign currency trader, Forex trading, and you still had the German mark, you still had the lira, you still had all the currencies of Europe that you could trade, and obviously those things have gone by the wayside. But that's how I got myself started in currencies. I then became a financial advisor.
Remember, there was the lira, the pay, all those other currencies, but the euro took.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And then I became a stockbroker. I did that for about 14 years. Even when I was a stockbroker, I still recommended precious metals. I felt they were an important part of the wealth insurance part of your portfolio. And about 17 years ago, I stumbled upon Republic Monetary Exchange, and I've been here ever since.
Okay, thank you. And Jim, give us your background, please. And by the way, they're looking right on Calabac in Phoenix, Arizona.
Correct. So, Robert, I've been in the precious metals business for 52 years now. So I did this right out of college, and I've never looked back, and I've never regretted 1 minute of it. It's been a great ride, and I wish I had 52 more years to do it. But this has been a nice long ride, and I expect to be here for several more years. But I've seen the gold and silver markets all over the map. I've seen them react and respond to various issues in the news, and the buying and the selling. I've seen it all. You and I had dinner several months ago about the Hunt brothers, how I was involved with the selling them about $250 million of the silver that they purchased back in 1979 and right up to 1980. So that was probably one of the more exciting periods in my life, was dealing with the Hunt brothers and watching silver go from $5 to $50 an ounce in just a matter of a year or so. And gold went from about $100 an ounce to $850, also in a matter of a few years. And then I've seen it all over the map ever since then. And we're in a very, very crazy market right now, as we talked about just the other day, especially with silver.
Because there are oil guys who are rich guys, and they thought they could corner the market in silver. And they bought tons and tons of silver. They actually were so rich, they actually tilted the market in their favor. And then somebody shut them down. And I think one of the federal judges is, we put the wrong people in jail. The Hunt brothers were doing it legally, but the U.S. government came after them and did it illegally. But I remember that time I was just starting out, and I've been buying silver since 1965. And when I saw silver just go from nothing to, how much an ounce, Jim, did they drive it up to?
It's over $65 an ounce. It was close to 67 earlier today. But this is a record high number today as we tape.
How much did the Hunt brothers drive silver up to?
So they went from $5 an ounce in early 79 until January of 1980. They went from $5 an ounce to 50. And when the thieves on the Board of Governors at COMEX and all of the short sellers decided that they wanted to put the kibosh on the Hunt brothers, they exercised Rule 7, which allowed them to restrict the Hunt brothers from buying any more silver. They could only sell. So if you had short positions in silver, you could buy, but nobody could institute new long positions, including the Hunt brothers. And that's how it went from $50 an ounce to $10 an ounce in just a matter of hours. And they were swindled by the exchanges and the short sellers by $1 to $2 billion is the estimate. But they were doing nothing more than what people are doing today, is that they wanted to hedge their dollars with something of solid value, and that would be silver. In fact, Bunker Hunt told me once that he thought silver was more valuable than gold. And to some respects, he's right, because the the uses for silver are much greater now than ever. You have in the medical field, you have solar panels, iPhones, all of the instruments that we're using now in everyday use is off the charts as to the amount that's needed. And there's a great shortfall from what is being produced each year to what is actually coming to the market. So we're in a very topsy-turvy situation right now in the markets.
Who screwed the Hunt brothers?
It was the exchange and the Board of Governors who were shorting silver all the way up to the top. And they instituted Rule 7, which didn't allow the Hunt brothers to support their positions. And they were controlling roughly $100 million ounces of silver, which was a huge amount at the time. It's not so much today because there's a lot more above ground silver known. But because they were short, they were protecting themselves. And if the Hunts couldn't buy anymore, the only thing that could happen is that the price could come crashing down, and it did just that. And the trade houses, the hedge funds, the various institutions that trade precious metals, they were bailed out of their short positions, which they were deep underwater with, and they came out clean as a whistle. And the Hunt brothers lost $1 to $2 billion, which at that time was a lot of money. Today, it's not so much when you think about it. All the billionaires that are involved in the silver market, that's why I'm saying it's in a topsy-turvy market right now, that you've got all these different reasons for owning silver and people that are shorting silver. And it's like nothing I've ever seen before.
Right. And silver is a structural metal. In other words, it's used, the Chinese are hoarding it right now because if they can have silver at a good price when they're buying even the liquid doré bars and all those things.
Well, not only that, I don't know if you heard, but China's silver export ban starts January 1st.
Yeah. Silver is the most valuable metal. And I agree with the Hunt brothers. I think silver is more valuable than gold. But I started buying it in 65 just because, and this is from Jim Clark here, you hold up a little quarter or a $half. And in 1964, it was silver. Then 65, it turned to copper. And that was Gresham's law. Is when the bad money enters the system, good money goes into hiding. So the government has been playing games with money. And silver is such an essential metal for industry versus gold. The other part is that every time you fire a Tomahawk missile into these war areas, I think so many ounces of silver blow up out there. And it takes a long time to find silver and produce silver. And we're burning it up at high speed right now. That's why the Chinese are hoarding it. And so the people hoarding gold are kind of out of it. And then one more, I don't know what you call it, but JP Morgan, they got sued how much for manipulating silver?
I think they had to pay a $900 million fine
Nearly
for
$1 billion.
for spoofing silver. Yeah.
Yeah, because the JP Morgan was manipulating the price of silver. And guess what? So they sued them to get almost $1 billion in fines. And they're the same guys still selling the SLV, which is fake silver, paper silver. So it's one of the most volatile, misunderstood metals, yet it's structural. It's used in everything we do today. And, you know, the more we go to AI, artificial intelligence, silver goes up in value, yet the price is suppressed.
Exactly.
So I think it's one of the most important investments people can make today. So that's my silver.
Have the situation that we're in today, because not only do we have fundamental demand for silver like we've never seen before, but you also have the investors who want out of their paper money and have something that's tangible.
Right.
And I recognized that in 1972 when I bought my first gold, and silver was like $1.25 an ounce, and gold was around $45 an ounce. And we had the problem then when Nixon took us off the gold standard in 1971. A lot of our grandparents that we would recognize today, they were buying silver and gold and passing it on as generational wealth. And we're seeing third generation young people bringing silver and gold that their grandparents had set aside for them back in the early 1970s. And you and I have had that conversation before. We bought our first gold at about the same time in the early 70s, and we have not looked back. And a tube of gold piece, 1 ounce gold pieces.
So silver just go from nothing to how much an ounce, Jim? Did they drive it up to?
It's over $65 an ounce. It was close to 67 earlier today. But this is a record high number today as we tape.
How much did the Hunt brothers drive silver up to?
So they went from $5 an ounce in early 79 until January of 1980. They went from $5 an ounce to 50. And when the thieves on the Board of Governors at COMEX and all of the short sellers decided that they wanted to put the kibosh on the Hunt brothers, they exercised Rule 7, which allowed them to restrict the Hunt brothers from buying any more silver. They could only sell. So if you had short positions in silver, you could buy, but nobody could institute new long positions, including the Hunt brothers. And that's how it went from $50 an ounce to $10 an ounce in just a matter of hours. And they were swindled by the exchanges and the short sellers by $1 to $2 billion is the estimate. But they were doing nothing more than what people are doing today, is that they wanted to hedge their dollars with something of solid value, and that would be silver. In fact, Bunker Hunt told me once that he thought silver was more valuable than gold. And to some respects, he's right, because the the uses for silver are much greater now than ever. You have in the medical field, you have solar panels, iPhones, all of the instruments that we're using now in everyday use is off the charts as to the amount that's needed. And there's a great shortfall from what is being produced each year to what is actually coming to the market. So we're in a very topsy-turvy situation right now in the markets.
Who screwed the Hunt brothers?
It was the exchange and the Board of Governors who were shorting silver all the way up to the top. And they instituted Rule 7, which didn't allow the Hunt brothers to support their positions. And they were controlling roughly $100 million ounces of silver, which was a huge amount at the time. It's not so much today because there's a lot more above ground silver known. But because they were short, they were protecting themselves. And if the Hunts couldn't buy anymore, the only thing that could happen is that the price could come crashing down. And it did just that. And the trade houses, the hedge funds, the various institutions that trade precious metals, they were bailed out of their short positions, which they were deep underwater with, and they came out clean as a whistle. And the Hunt brothers lost $1 to $2 billion, which at that time was a lot of money. Today, it's not so much when you think about it. All the billionaires that are involved in the silver market, that's what I'm saying. It's in a topsy-turvy market right now, that you've got all these different reasons for owning silver and people that are shorting silver. And it's like nothing I've ever seen before.
Right. And silver is a structural metal. In other words, it's used, the Chinese are hoarding it right now because if they can have silver at a good price, where they're buying even the liquid doré bars and all those things.
Well, not only that, I don't know if you heard, but China's silver export ban starts January 1st.
Yeah. Silver is the most valuable metal. And I agree with the Hunt brothers. I think silver is more valuable than gold. But I started buying in '65 just because, and this is from Jim Clark here, you hold up a little quarter or a half dollar. In 1964, it was silver. Then 65, it turned to copper. And that was Gresham's laws. When the bad money enters the system, good money goes into hiding. So the government has been playing games with money. And silver is such an essential metal for industry versus gold. The other part is that every time you fire a Tomahawk missile into these war areas, I think so many ounces of silver blow up out there. And it takes a long time to silver and produce silver. And we're burning it up at high speed right now. That's why the Chinese are hoarding it. And so the people hoarding gold are kind of out of it. And then one more I don't know what you call it, but J.P. Morgan, they got sued how much for manipulating silver?
I think they had to pay a $900 million fine
Nearly
for
$1 billion.
manipulating, for spoofing silver. Yeah.
Yeah, because the J.P. Morgan was manipulating the price of silver. And guess what? So they sued them to get almost $1 billion in fines. And they're the same guys still selling the SLV, which is fake silver, paper silver. So it's one of the most volatile, misunderstood metals, yet it's structural. It's used in everything we do today. And, you know, as we go to AI, artificial intelligence, silver goes up in value, yet the price is suppressed.
Exactly.
So I think it's one of the most important investments people can make today. So that's my silver.
So if the government weren't printing up so many Federal Reserve notes and with just a printing press and a keystroke, just adding billions and trillions of dollars to the national debt and to their balance sheet, and then buying silver and gold with that paper, we wouldn't have the situation that we're in today, because not only do we have fundamental demand for silver like we've never seen before, but you also have the investors who want out of their paper money and have something that's tangible.
Right.
And I recognized that in 1972 when I bought my first gold, and silver was like $1.25 an ounce, and gold was around $45 an ounce. And we had the problem then when Nixon took us off the gold standard in 1971. A lot of our grandparents that we would recognize today, they were buying silver and gold and passing it on as generational wealth. And we're seeing third generation young people bringing silver and gold that their grandparents had set aside for them back in the early 1970s. And you and I have had that conversation before. We bought our first gold at about the same time in the early 70s, and we have not looked back. And a tube of gold piece, 1 ounce gold pieces, costs less than a tube of silver pieces of the same ounces today.
Yeah. So this, before we go to break here, I wrote about it in this book here, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, that savers were losers. The reason I say that is because our illustrious academic system says, you know, save money. And what these idiots in the school system don't realize, that you're not saving money today, you're saving fake money, the US dollar. And as the national debt goes past 38 trillion on one side, but on the balance sheet, our national debt's like 260 trillion. They're going to keep printing more money, and people keep trying to save US dollars or yen or euros and all this. It's really stupid. But they want to save money with fake money. And that's why I want to bring Jim and Damon on, because I think you better understand, because I buy gold, silver, and Bitcoin and Ethereum, and I make money all the time. But why not make money than save fake money? I don't understand people. And silver today, in my opinion, and we don't give recommendations, and we're not an investment advisory show, that I would rather have everybody can afford silver yet. It's still $65 an ounce. You can still afford that. Where Bitcoin's up at 90,000 and gold's at 4,000. And so even a poor person can afford silver, but they'll hang on to the stupid peso, the yen, the dollar, or the euro. So we come back, we're going into what's better for you. Like I said, I think Peter Schiff is funny that Trump called him a loser because he crashed it. So we come back a bit more with Jim Clark and David Jones on advantage of gold, silver, and a new field called crypto. Because if you know what you're doing, you can make money in all of it, and you can lose money in all of them.
Can I just say something real quick, Robert, before we break away? And we talked about this before. My book, Real Money for Free People. I talk about the Hunt situation in the book, and I'm recommending it that you could go to our website, realmoneyforfreepeople.com. And if you like, I'll send your listeners a signed copy of this book as a courtesy to you.
You'll send anybody who calls in for the book a signed
copy?
Well,
they could go online. They can subscribe to our newsletter. They can order the book, and I'll do it as a courtesy to you. That I'll send them a signed copy.
And what's the website?
It's realmoneyforfreepeople.com.
That's the name of the website.
Right.
And your company is called Republic Monetary Exchange.
Correct. And that's rmegold.com.
Yeah. So all you people who are losers out there saving dollars, working hard for dollars, or the euro or the yen or the peso, this is your show because you're being screwed because your mommy and daddy told you to work hard for money and pay your taxes. So we come back, more as to why you should buy gold, silver, or Bitcoin. We'll be right back.
Let me speak directly to you for a moment, because if you have been paying attention, you know this economy is not healthy. Debt is soaring, the dollar is losing strength, and the AI stock bubble is inflating so fast that even Wall Street is warning investors to slow down. While that happened, gold and silver broke all-time records. Gold over 4,300, silver doubling past 60. Markets do not move like that unless something deeper is shifting under the surface. That is why major banks like Morgan Stanley now recommend putting up to 20% of a portfolio in the precious metals. They see the same risk I do. The question is not whether the system will shake, it's whether your retirement can survive. My audience has been treated well by Priority Gold. They have thousands of five-star reviews, and Forbes ranks them as their top gold IRA partner. In a fragile economy, trust matters. Their gold and silver info guide walks you through 3 simple steps to add gold and silver to your IRA or 401k tax and penalty free. And the free, no-pressure portfolio review will show you exactly where you stand heading into 2026. No guessing, just clarity. Call 866-703-9895 for your free guide and review. That's 866-703-9895. Or take out your phone, open a text message, type guide, and send it to 24999. Again, guide to 24999. Prepare now. Waiting has never protected anyone.
Welcome back to today's very important show, the Rich Dad Radio Show. Not really a radio, it's a podcast show. But we have my old friend Jim Clark and Damon Jones. And we're talking about, is gold, silver, or Bitcoin better for you? And gold and silver have been money for thousands of years. Bitcoin is about 15 years. And money is flying all over. The reason that's happening is 1971, Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard and money became debt. And then what happened in 64, 65, they took our real silver money and they turned it into copper. So they've been playing games with our money. And when you play games with money, the rich get richer and the poor middle class get poorer. So that's what we see happening today. I can't believe the homelessness spreading across this country, because every time you print money, guys like us get richer, but the working class people still working for money, getting poorer. So let's go into the future, since silver and gold have been ancient money. So, Damon, what's happening in the future? What do you see happening now? What are the Chinese or Samsung?
So, yeah, there's a lot going on in Asia with regard to silver. And you talked earlier about Bunker Hunt and how he felt that silver was more valuable for gold than gold. And part of the reason for that is silver is used in so much industry. And when you dig gold out of the ground, guess what? It ends up in a vault somewhere. When you dig silver out of the ground, at least half of it is being used in something. Well, that's just getting the demand for that physical silver is just going up higher and higher for industrial purposes. So what China has done.
One thing, Damon, the more we go into the information age, the more valuable silver becomes than gold.
That's right. Because silver, silver allows everything to function, whether it's your semiconductors, whether it's your solar panels, electricity, you need solar.
Rockets.
And with the new technology that's coming out, the battery technology and the solar technology, that's just requiring more and more silver. So what China has done is basically understands, like we understand now, that silver is a critical mineral. And they've proceeded to put an export ban on silver starting January 1st.
The Chinese did.
And this also coincides with BYD, which is a Chinese company, which is the largest manufacturer of batteries. They are going to be introducing the silver solid state battery. And it requires a tremendous amount of silver to make these batteries, but they're really efficient. We're talking 1,000-mile range. We're talking 10-minute charges. These are going to be the batteries that everybody's going to want for their EVs. Well, the key is you got to have the silver. And that's why companies that are in China, in Japan, instead of going to the LBMA, instead of going to COMEX, they're actually going to the sources of silver now. They need to tie up that silver for their critical components. So they're going right to the source. We're just talking about one company, but there are literally thousands of companies that need silver, and they're going to go where the silver is being mined, and they're going to buy it before we have the opportunity to get it, if they can.
Right. Jim, any comments on the future of silver? Is ancient, you know?
Yeah, and silver has actually been around and used as money longer than gold has. We know at least 6,000 years with gold and probably another 2,000 to 4,000 with silver. And a lot of people call it the poor man's gold, or you and I call them the silver stackers, when you can have a tube of silver pieces for, $1,200 to $1,500, as opposed to one gold piece. You could get maybe a quarter of an ounce or a half an ounce for the same amount of money that you would pay for a tube of silver eagles. So I like both of them, and the attention to silver has been like nothing else I've ever seen in my 52 years. That there are more players in the market. There are a lot of paper contracts that are coming back to roost now. And I think that's why we see the price at $65. It's not going to surprise me to see in the first quarter next year silver well over $100, and I think maybe on its way to $200 or $300. Maybe not next year, but sometime in the near future. But it's not that silver has become more valuable, although it is that. The price is reflective because of the paper money that has become worth less and less. That's why we have record prices. That investors all over the world are saying, we don't want America's paper dollars. And as Dan was talking before about the currencies that have gone by the wayside over the years, just since he was in the foreign exchange business, the dollar at some point is going to go by the wayside. And who's ever holding them is going to be holding the bag. If you're holding gold and silver, it's an asset that speaks for itself. It's an asset that has intrinsic value within its own metal content, and it never goes to zero. The value of gold and silver will always be something in relationship to the medium of exchange that we use. In our case, it's the US dollar. And if they keep printing up more and more dollars, I believe that the attention to gold and silver will be much greater than ever.
Right.
And I also think Bitcoin, that when it came around 16 years ago, it was because the same investors that are buying silver and gold, they said, well, can we have something else that is outside of the dollar? And the Bitcoin having 21 million units maximum, that's how it came about. So that's the granddaddy of all of the crypto money. And we've had 2,500 others that have come on board since then. Well, that's going to increase as the technology comes about to create more crypto money. There's going to be more and more of these cryptos. So it's almost like there's going to be an unlimited amount of crypto money in circulation. Whereas gold and silver, you've got to go actually mine that, not mine it in the sense that you mine a Bitcoin and you use a lot of energy to do so. You're going to have to use a lot of energy to dig down and find the gold and silver, and the earth only has so much of it. And once it's gone, it's pretty much gone. And it's not even going to be so much, what is the price of silver? What is the availability of it? What is the availability of gold? And it may not be there in the not too distant future, because who's going to want to trade their gold and silver and get Federal Reserve notes that can be printed unlimited amounts at any given point?
Do you own any Bitcoin or Ethereum and all that stuff?
I own none of it, and I never have. I've missed
David, you own any?
I sold my Bitcoin. I sold it early. I used to mine for Bitcoin. I never bought any Bitcoin. But
so I own Bitcoin. I made a fortune in it.
Yeah.
But you have to know when to enter and when to exit. And there's a difference between, and the big difference too is that with silver and gold, you have storage problems. I had a friend who stood on stage one day and he says, I keep all my gold and silver at my house. I said, why don't you tell people to come on over, because that's what they're going to do. And so Bitcoin's advantage is basically electronic money. And it can hide and you can carry it in your wallet. So there's advantages to both. But just have to understand there's no such thing as safe money. Even gold and silver goes up and down. And today, after the Hunt brothers tried to corner the market, silver is still around where it was 20, 30 years ago. And everybody in the world can afford an ounce of silver, $64. It may take them a year to pay for it, some of these people, but it's better to have silver than paper. The biggest storage. So, I mean, how much do people pay for storage of gold and silver, Jim?
Because I don't know. I don't get into those topics I don't want to know where people put their gold and silver, and that's their business. I recommend typically a floor safe or something secure, and you have an alarm and all of that. But I don't know what they pay for storage fees for it.
You don't want to store it at home because you're inviting people over, for entertainment here.
You just want to be very discreet with what you own, right? Especially if it's a physical asset.
Well,
like
my
gold and
biggest
silver.
problem is I started buying silver in '65. And then Jim knows I'd go to his store, Republic Monetary Exchange on Camelback in Phoenix. And they come in these grain boxes. And pretty soon, these freaking grain boxes, they were stacking to the ceiling. What am I going to do with this here? So I had to go rent a vault outside of Phoenix to hide it there. And it's a good problem because I made a lot of money just buying the stuff. But storage also becomes an expense. You don't have a Bitcoin or Ethereum or crypto or that.
Well, that is the bad news, that it's hard to store silver, but the good news is it's priced in ounces. So if you have a lot of silver and you have a lot of pounds of silver, you're in good shape no matter where you have it.
And the reason I bought Silver Eagles, U.S. coins, is because if the dollar did collapse or the yen collapsed or the euro collapsed, I can still walk around with silver dollars in my hand and trade. But you walk around with a dead money like the Weimar Republic, which brought, Weimar Republic is what brought Hitler to power. They printed so much of it, they were using paper for firewood. And that's what I think might happen. An outside chance is you'll be having so much hyperinflation with US dollars or euro or yen or pesos that you'll be using it for firewood. But gold and silver will be gold and silver. Any comments on that, Damon?
Well, what I would say is with Bitcoin, yeah, it's very portable. You can move money, large amounts of money very quickly over borders. Doesn't seem to slow it down. But the thing about Bitcoin is it was first. Early adopters. It represents over 50% of crypto market cap is in Bitcoin. But ultimately, Bitcoin does not pay a dividend. Bitcoin has no cash flow. Ultimately, if I was to calculate using fundamental financial calculations on the present value of Bitcoin, every calculation would be zero because there's no cash flow, there's no dividend, and you can't use it utility-wise for anything other than to move money around. So I think ultimately, as cryptos start to be asset-backed, like your gold cryptos, your silver cryptos, your soybean cryptos, whatever happens to come out, I think the asset-backed cryptos is where we're headed. And the fiat cryptos are going to go the way of the dollar.
Yeah. And one more thing has happened. I was listening to Jim Rickards. And what happens is this Ethereum is like blockchain. So what it does is, let's say the three of us, Jim, Damon, and I, invented the Jim, Damon, Robert crypto. We would use Ethereum to back it with gold. In other words, it's like the Ethereum becomes like the storage vault. And we back it with that. And what Jim Rickards said, is a friend of mine, he goes, you're going to see a scandal so big because they call it stable coins. And every crook wants an opportunity to lie to you. So Ethereum is going to be big time. I own some of that too. But the fraud has just begun. So that's why I'd rather have gold and silver, even though I have storage problems with it, because it'll always be money. It's been money for thousands and thousands of years. And silver is still affordable. And yet people would rather have cash Makes no sense to me. So final words, Jim. Final words. I'll go down.
Tier 1 asset. So there's no counterparty risk for anybody. That if you have it and you have possession of it.
Explain counterparty.
So that, Damon, you go into that.
So counterparty risk is basically when you own an asset like a stock or a bond. The stock or bond only has value as long as your counterparty is, or the other person, let's say the CEO of the company isn't cooking the books to make your stock have value. Or if the company that you lent money to fails to make an interest payment or doesn't make their bond payment, that's counterparty risk. All of a sudden that asset isn't worth anything. Well, with gold and silver, they've already dug it out of the ground. You can now hold it in your hand. So it is independent of another person's promise. Nobody has to make a promise for gold to have value. Already dug it out of the ground. Yeah. Whereas a stock, bond, all that, someone has to perform for your asset to have value.
Right, like the U.S. bond, they say safe. The U.S. is the biggest debtor nation in world history. How can the bond be safe? I mean, people are that freaking stupid. Give a break. And China and Japan are dumping U.S. bonds to buy gold. Central banks are dumping bonds to buy gold. And people are saying, oh, bonds are safe. Only a loser would think that.
So when you have all this currency out there in the world, and whether it's crypto or whether it's actual currency of the realm, there's not enough gold and silver to go around for everybody that's ultimately going to want it. So I'm asked frequently, don't you think that gold and silver is topped out and it's only going to go lower from here? Well, we had a podcast 3 years ago, Robert, and silver and gold were less than half the price that it is now, and that question came up. I said, no, this is just revving up. This is just the beginning. That investors all over the world are saying, I want something other than some paper promise.
Yeah.
And they want the actual physical gold and silver in their hand. And that's the hedge against inflation that we talked about back in 1972.
Right. So let's just complete this conversation. It's gold, silver, Bitcoin, crypto, Ethereum, and all this stuff. I own all of it. So Peter Schiff trashing crypto, multiple loser. I think it's one of the funniest things I've seen in a long time. Peter's a friend of mine. He's a smart boy, but he talks this book. And, he's only one way with Peter. It's his way. But the thing that cracks me up is with Bitcoin, you have to know when to buy and when to sell. And with gold and silver, I hold on forever. That's a big, big difference because it'll go up and down in price. But in my opinion, it'll always be money. Final words, Jim, will it always be money?
So what it really comes down to is not so much what is the price of silver, because we're talking about Federal Reserve notes. We're talking about a debt instrument. So 65 debt instruments it takes to buy an ounce of silver, and 4,300 debt instruments it takes to buy an ounce of gold. It's not going to be so much what is the price, what is the availability? Can you still get it at any price? And if you won't take dollars, what will you take? You want to be paid in Bitcoin or Ethereum or something else? And I think that the cryptocurrencies and gold and silver are very compatible because they came about and people buy them because they don't trust the currency of the realm, because governments have a way of printing up a lot more than they have something to back it with. And I wanted to show this. This is a $10 gold certificate from 1922. This was not money at all. This was merely a certificate for money for a gold coin that was on deposit at a bank. And that's how this paper money thing came about, is that people were trading their gold certificates or silver certificates up until 1964 and they weren't moving the silver and gold at all. Now people are saying, I want the gold and silver in my hand, not the paper money that doesn't represent anything.
What I'm watching and what we're witness to right now, what everybody is witness to, is the final stages of the end of the price management scheme in the precious metals. Has been going on ever since Nixon took the U.S. off the gold exchange standard in 1971.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for December 22nd through December 29th, 2025, while supplies last. First this week, 2026 1-ounce silver American Eagles are just $6.50 over spot per ounce and will ship in late January. 1-ounce gold Britannia are just $90 over spot per ounce. Quarter-ounce gold Eagles are just $105 over melt per coin. And finally, call and ask about our Christmas special on 90% junk silver. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Welcome back to Liberty and Finance. We're always privileged to have this distinguished returning guest, Ed Steer, who is a member of the Gold Antitrust Action Committee, GATA.org, and legendary in his own right for having been an observer of metals markets for longer than most of us have even been around, joins us today, Tuesday, December 23rd. Ed, thank you for coming back on Liberty and Finance.
My pleasure, Dunnigan.
You've been a stalwart supporter of free and open markets and a sharp critic of the COMEX and other markets that seem to be managed, and have documented that on a continual basis for your subscribers and shared quite a bit of that information with us here and our viewers and subscribers on Liberty and Finance. This has been a dramatic month, week, couple of days in the metals markets, not just for silver, but also gold and platinum. Could you kick us off with what you're watching most closely at this time? We also later in the interview want to talk about yet another what appears to be a deep fake post that came out on social media that got a lot of people very concerned about what's going on in the silver markets and whether a critical price threshold was breached that pulled the trigger, and it's going to cause the downfall of JP Morgan for guaranteed within 3 weeks and all this stuff. So we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. But first, we want to get your current view of the biggest things you see happening right now in the metals space and what you're watching closely.
What I'm watching and what we're witness to right now, what everybody is witness to, is the final stages of the end of the price management scheme in the precious metals. Has been going on ever since Nixon took the U.S. off the gold exchange standard in 1971. Since 1975, they've been actively suppressing the precious metals with no thought to how they were going to end this thing when it finally became apparent they could no longer keep things under control. And starting about a year ago, and now picking up with accelerating speed, not only by the month, but by the week and by the day and by the hour, we're starting to see the whole scheme come crashing down. And I'm noticing here that there's a fight right now. There's a fight for a battle at $71 for silver. But I can tell you categorically right now, if the large commercial traders, whether they be bullion banks or other entities, weren't actively involved in the silver market right now, it would be north of $100. Right now, it would have been north of $100 yesterday. So, like I said, we can look at the small details, what's going on today and yesterday and last week, but the big picture is that silver and gold are now being allowed to regrettably reach their true intrinsic values, and whatever those are, I have no idea, but there's a long, long way to go to the upside in all of these precious metals, silver in particular.
The mechanisms you've been documenting on a weekly and daily basis for your subscribers about the attacks that are made at the most vulnerable times on the markets, dumping huge quantities of paper contracts and that sort of thing to manipulate the price, it seems to be failing in the face of physical markets, the focus shifting from derivative-based paper manipulation of the price to physical demand. Can you talk to us about what we know about physical demand and where it's happening around the world and how that's changing the game?
Well, sure. And I mean, like you said, they go into the thinnest traded and most illiquid portions of the market in early Globex trading in the evenings or in early trading overseas. And they pull their bids, spoof whatever is necessary to bomb the prices. Like 20 years ago, it would have lasted for months. Now it's down to lasting just a few hours. And even today, you take a look what happened in the COMEX. I don't think their price smash down lasted any more than about 30 minutes. So, their efforts to keep the price down is failing. And as you also pointed out, the second part, the fact of the matter is, you go back to 1970 or 1971, it's a totally different world today. The United States was the predominant, the British and the Americans were the primary powers in the financial military world. Well, that's all changed. And we've had these cheap prices for so long, and demand has never stopped, and it's increasing. The world population increasing, the economy is increasing. And because prices have been suppressed for so long, we haven't seen a commensurate increase in production. And all of a sudden, we're faced with what you said is, incredible demand in silver, gold, platinum, and palladium. And the supply just isn't there. And it's not going to be there for many, many years to come. So, we're just reverting to the mean after 50 plus years of price suppression. And the demand is, especially in silver, is what Phil Baker, the past CEO of Hecla Mining, said he calls it rapacious. And that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, we've been hearing about the demand surfacing on global markets as well as off-exchange demand, and the evidence of lending rates spiking to levels that have never been seen before. Even today, I know Clive Thompson was posting saying that the premium of the Eastern markets versus the West has never been as high as it is on silver. It was like over $3 more for silver, approaching $4 over per ounce. Can you talk to us about what we know globally about the shifting demand, the movement from the Western paper markets to the Eastern physical markets?
Yeah, well, there may be that price differential in China for, if you're buying the stuff physically in the retail market. But I know from the data that I get every day that the premium of China's price of silver over the U.S. price is only about 4%. So, there is an arbitrage there of 4%. Has been much, much higher than that in the past. But there's no question that the price is being set, in the COMEX futures market by traders in the Far East market. And, they were very active last night, and they've been active for the last month. But, the demand is in the East. China's the number 2 producer of silver in the world. They're also the biggest refiner of silver in the world, and sooner or later, the COMEX and the LBMA are going to go the way of the dodo bird. And the prices will be set in a true physical market, which is in Shanghai, which is with the way it should be. But, you can see that the foreshocks are there, like you just mentioned. The premiums over there compared to what they are here are enormous, whether it be in the physical market or in the actual exchange rate of 4% price differential between New York and Shanghai. But, the pull towards China is inexorable, and sooner or later, that's where the prices of all these commodities, especially the precious metals, are going to be set.
Just this week, we saw, actually, it was just last week, we saw some rather concerning communications come out in the form of a post that was on various social media platforms. Some fairly high net worth clients and others were rattled by this because it seemed to imply or state and claim actually that there were thresholds breached in the COMEX, new hard and fast rules that would trigger margin requirements that would basically bring the bullion banks to their knees, the biggest names. And it seems to be that some of these new AI generated videos are coming on an increasing frequency. We had one about a couple months ago that claimed it looked like a video of what appeared to be the Oracle of Omaha, Warren Buffett, saying, gold sellers should get out of it. And then just about 2 weeks ago, we had one saying that people need to sell all their silver and convert it, or all their gold and all of their silver and get it into gold because silver is now classified as a critical strategic material. It's going to be seized by the government. You got to get into gold, and so you can get to safety. And now this one just this weekend saying that the CME hidden rule just got triggered, and it's going to blow up the bullion banks, and everything's going to shoot forever high. What is your take on these? This, I would say, a rash of apparently deepfake AI generated posts that seem to be rattling a lot of people because they don't know whether to trust it or not.
Well, the one that scares me the most is the one I saw with Abraham Lincoln earlier this morning. When he comes out and he's talking about silver the way he is, it's time to sell. I got to tell people, they take 2 blue pills and call me in the morning. There's so much of this AI stuff out there that's total BS. And, when I started off in precious metals like 25 years ago, there was Ted Butler, Dave Morgan, and myself. That was pretty much it in the silver space. And now everybody's an expert on it. And with AI, there's so much crap out there, and that's what it is. And you have to look at it and say, is this believable or not? There's nothing going on at the CFTC right now that I know of. And all of this stuff that, the thing is that people are just so gullible. Some people are just so gullible. And as far as I'm concerned, you have to take all this stuff with a big grain of salt and just totally ignore it. Just look at your stock portfolio, look at the price, and forget about everything else. Will the CFTC do something further down the road? I don't know. Silver's at 70. What are they going to do when it hits 100, 120, 200, or whatever the price is going to be? What is the CFTC going to do? What is the CME group going to do? What is the LBMA going to do? That's what I would be watching. And then when something official comes out from them, okay, if you go on the CFTC's website or the CME's website and they got an actual press release there, then that's what you should believe. But, all this other crap that you're hearing out there, just pour yourself a cool one and ignore it.
Well, people have been relying on people like Ted Butler and yourself to not have to wait for the CFTC or the CME group to make the announcement, because you watch internally what's going on. You not only analyze the commitment of trader reports, but a lot of other stats and actual evidence that displays what's not being talked about sometimes. That's very important for people to keep an eye on. In addition to the silver market, you also keep an eye on gold and platinum. Among those, we've talked about silver almost exclusively up to the moment. Are there other things you're watching on gold and platinum right now that you think are noteworthy?
Well, after silver, platinum is the big 4 and 8 shorts number 2 problem child after silver. It's been that way forever. There's a chart that I put up in my column every Saturday. It's called the days to cover. The number of days of world production would take to cover the short positions of all the physically traded commodities on the COMEX. Silver's been nailed to the right hand of that chart forever, and platinum has been number 2. And what we're seeing, silver, platinum's up 7% today, and it was up 6% yesterday. It could be up 100%. We're seeing a massive short covering rally in all the precious metals right now, including gold, but mostly in silver and platinum. They've been short, the 8 large traders, including the bullion banks, have been short these metals for 50 plus years. And these trades are all starting to come unwound as the smaller traders rush to cover and book huge, huge losses. And that's what's driving the price higher. They go in there, they have to buy a long to cover a short position. So you just can't, look at platinum or silver independently, because it's all part of one commodity and includes copper too. Although it hasn't moved very much, it's another metal that's being actively managed. So it's the whole complex coming where we're seeing price discovery for the first time. Where this ends, I don't know. Like I said, I expect at some point, if this thing really gets outrageous, is that the CFTC and the CME group might come in. But you can't look at silver in a vacuum or platinum in a vacuum. This is all one thing where, this, like I said, the price management scheme is starting to come unraveled, and the shorts are starting to panic, and, they're booking heavy losses. They've got year end coming up here at the end of next week, and they've had these open losses on their books for months or years, and finally they're taking the physical losses to go with them. And the effect, of course, is they jump in there to panic short covers. They're driving the price to the moon, and there's no sign of that whatsoever in the Commitment of Traders report that it's going to stop anytime soon.
In the past, what happened when it was like the 1980s with the Hunt brothers and the COMEX changed the rules, or 3 years ago when we had the nickel market running away and the COMEX changed the rules? What do you foresee might happen in that regards this time to put out such a fire?
Well, you have to look at silver, okay? And here's one time where you just have to look at silver because, we've been a structural supply-demand deficit now for 5 years going on 6. 2025 isn't 1981. I lived through 1981. I remember it well. I made a bunch of money during that time period. I lost a bunch of money, so I learned my lesson. But things are different this time, and they really are different. Back then, there was no structural deficit whatsoever. The U.S. government was sitting on 5 billion ounces of silver. Now they got nothing. And demand everywhere for silver, physical silver off the COMEX, out of London, you name it. Even the retail bullion trade has picked up an awful lot. And the demand for physical from all quarters, like, the headline to my column today was 17 million ounces of silver went into SLV. I mean, that 17 million ounces is a lot. That's about 8 days of world silver production that disappeared into SLV in one day. And that's just one ETF. So the demand is absolutely ferocious. The CFTC stepped into the silver market now and tried to cash settle this thing. It would break the exchange. As simple as that. I mean, the exchange would lose complete legitimacy. And Ted Butler said that a long, long time ago. So, I'm sure that the guys with the, sitting in the C-suites at the CME Group and the CFTC are wondering how they're going to stop this runaway train, but there's nothing they can do in the silver market because even if we had $300 silver tomorrow, the amount of silver coming out of the ground, which is about 820 million ounces a year, plus whatever you get from recycle and scrap and stuff like that, is not anywhere near enough to meet demand. And no matter what the silver price is, we're not going to have another ounce of silver come out of the ground for another 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 years. So this deficit that we're looking at right now is going to be permanent for the next 5 or 10 years. And by that time, with silver at $300, the investor demand will suck up everything out there. So there's going to be a real crisis in the silver market before this is all over.
Many people who are subscribers to you or subscribers to our channel may have been wishing and hoping for such a day for a long, long time, partly out of the notion that we've been facing untrue and unreal markets and holding out for us to see real free and fair and true markets. But what you're talking about is a very convulsive and volatile time. Can you share both the things that you think are legitimate to be having been looked forward to about such a time, but also cautionary as far as what might accompany it in terms of the impacts on everyone's lives?
True enough, Dunning. And, I'll tell you what, this falls into the category of be careful what you wish for. There's a couple of other factors that we haven't discussed in this. First of all, that, of course, the U.S. has declared silver a strategic metal. And the second, even more important thing as far as I'm concerned, is the fact that starting January 1st, in 10 days' time, you're going to require an export license to be able to get silver out of China. And, China's got a few bones to pick with the United States right now with their tanker getting seized off the coast of Venezuela. I can see silver becoming a weapon, just like the rare earths are a weapon now. About a year or so ago, I penned in one of my columns that said silver as a question mark, a weapon of financial mass destruction, and it could turn out to be that way. And we got to get into a real world fight over silver and a whole bunch of other key commodities. So, people say we're in the 3rd or 4th inning of the silver bull market. I disagree. I think we're barely at the top of the 1st inning. And how this is going to play out in the end, it's wild ass speculation on my part, your part, anybody's part. I just hope that it doesn't get to the point where the CFTC and the LVMA and the CME Group really put the hammer down. But I don't think they're going to be able to get away with this time because there are other players in the world, like China, for instance, Peru, Mexico, Russia, all these, and India, especially India, all of these, if the United States tries to put the hammer down, I can just see the silver market going absolutely wild. But like I said, this is all pure speculation. And what I do know for sure is that it barely got off the ground.
One of the concerns that a lot of people who've been following our channel, Reluctant Preppers, was the original title of our channel before it became Liberty and Finance. And one of the patterns that we've observed about desperate governments and desperate times and desperate measures being taken is that oftentimes when it seems that those in power are boxed into a corner and they're going to have to bite the bullet and come out and admit responsibility and tell the truth and so on, that there'll be accountability, there is instead a disproportionate crisis that sometimes seems to be engineered to distract the attention of the public and certainly get them to rally around whatever the latest thing is, whether it's need to start a war or whether it's need to have some other big crisis. Are there any thoughts that you think would be realistic examples of that could accompany this? You already hinted at geopolitical tensions surrounding critical materials. Anything else at this time, just so that people aren't caught unawares as they say, gee, looks like we're finally going to get some truth in these markets?
Well, I'll tell you this, as I've been saying in my column for the last 15 years, more frequently in the last couple, is that when this thing finally does blow sky high, silver, gold, platinum, palladium, we're in the process of that now. When this thing finally does blow, it's my opinion that it won't happen in a news vacuum. Like you said, there'll be something else going on where people say, well, look, it's over here, whether this happened or that happened or this blew up or that got sunk or whatever. So they can say, well, that's why it caused the precious metals or whatever to go sky high.
Like some kind of a act of God, force majeure, the reason why the dog ate my homework, not that we've been lying to you and cheating and lining our own pockets at the expense of honest participants in the market for decades.
Yeah, the dog ate my homework is the one I like the best, because when it does come crashing down, they'll be pointing at something else and not at themselves where it really belongs. But anybody in the market out there that's been following the precious metals knows perfectly well who's at fault here, and it's the Western financial and banking system at the root cause of all this.
Let's bring it down to the individual then. In the face of these powers, as George Carlin says, the club that's a big one, but you're not in it, making the big moves, the big movers and shakers that are going to tell us some other story or some other spin to cover their tracks here. What can an ordinary person in the cheap seats do now that's still an option available to take care of their family, their community, their future, in the face of all of that uncertainty that we're all faced with?
The first thing that people have to do is buy the physical metal itself, hold it in your hand while it's still available in the retail sector, because one of these days, as more and more people are saying, it will become unobtainium, because when it really starts to hit the fan, I think what you're going to see is the silver will be gobbled up by industry, and nothing will be allowed to go into either the ETFs or into the retail sector, and it just won't be available at all anymore. So that's the first thing. Here in Canada, we just broke the $100 an ounce barrier on silver yesterday for the first time. I looked at a 10-ounce bar and it was like $1,014. I said, "You've got to be kidding me." Because I remember back in 1999, I think I paid $70 for one. So, you've got to buy the stuff first, because there'll come a point when you're going to absolutely not be able to get it. And the other thing to do is, I have a huge stock portfolio, as everybody does, I'm sure. And my advice to people, if they're going to get involved in the stocks, is they buy a mutual fund in the United States. The one that everybody should be flocking to is SILJ, the Junior Silver Miners. I own a huge chunk of that. And there's another one called 9 Point Silver Equities. It's a Canadian fund, but it's also available in the U.S. That's a mutual fund that contains a whole bunch of silver stocks. But, buy the physical, buy a bit of, and if you have risk tolerance, then buy some of the shares too. But, like I said, silver right now is at 70, and I can envision it someday at a price peak of being 10 times what it is today.
And for people who want to follow your prodigious work and output that you do, analyzing and tracking and exposing the truth about what's going on in these markets on a more frequent basis than your visits here. And by the way, if you folks don't want to miss out Ed here, make sure you're on our free mailing list by going to libertyandfinance.com, libertyandfinance, all one word, .com. Put your email address, click submit. You won't miss a single episode here with Ed, but you will miss out on a lot of his writing in between his visits here. Ed, how can they make sure that they are getting all of your input?
Donnie, just to tell you the truth, I'm not really looking for new subscribers, but if you wish to sign up for my column, just Google my name, Ed Steer, S-T-E-E-R, Ed Steer Gold and Silver. My website will pop up. There's a tab on there for a sample column, and you can read it there. It's very detailed, and it's very fact-based, and if that's the kind of information you're looking for about on the silver market, I provide, 5 columns a week, 52 weeks a year. So it's about 260 columns for US $100, which is not a lot of money.
Are you a notary looking to significantly boost your income? JusticeFund Exchange is your pathway to earning up to $35,000 per month. By combining cutting-edge legal, financial, and technological tools, we transform traditional notary roles. Process high-value financial documents like digital judgment fund claims and UCC-1 financing statements for substantial commissions. Our platform leverages blockchain technology and the Uniform Commercial Code for seamless transactions. We offer comprehensive training and tools to automate, verify, and market financial instruments. Unlock a new revenue stream beyond your regular notarial services with JusticeFund Exchange. Join us today and elevate your notary business to new heights. Master the future of legal transactions with JFE Notary Chain and turn innovation into your competitive edge. Get started with the standard plan at $1,999, limited time $1,599, and unlock full curriculum access, a digital certificate, our community forum, and 3 months of instructor support. Build foundational expertise that gets you career entry-level ready faster and with confidence. Go further with premium at $2,999, limited time $2,399, including all standard features plus 6 months extended support, 2x one-on-one mentoring sessions, access to advanced workshops, and an alumni network invite. Enjoy accelerated learning, personalized guidance, and enhanced networking to stand out in the market. Scale with our corporate solutions featuring a tailored curriculum, dedicated corporate training, bulk enrollment discounts, and white label options. Equip teams with scalable training and give your organization a decisive strategic advantage. Enroll now and join a future-focused community mastering JFE Notary Chain from day one.
All right. Hope I'm coming in loud and clear, and I'm not going to take up too much of your time because I know you're still, enjoying what they call the festive holiday with family, friends, etc. But for all my UPMA members, there is something that I want you to pay attention to. Today is definitely a day of reckoning for precious metals. I'm looking at the precious metals market as it opens. I'm looking at the actual London fix, and let me just break it down for you. There is definitely a variable that you want to keep in place, especially being what we call a ratio player. And it'll be imperative that you go to your UPMA account and look at the price of gold as an ounce, and then also look at the price of a silver dollar. And what you'll notice when you actually do the math is we're at a very unique ratio. Now, anything that's 77 on up, you should be buying silver. And what you're going to notice is if you go to 56, 53 to 1, you'll notice where you need to be in that regard. So if you are 56 going south to 56 to 1, then you should be converting your silver to gold. And for those of you that are UPMA members, I want you to pay attention to this, because a lot of people right now are missing out on the world's greatest wealth transformation on the planet. So in one instance, you have the ability to easily jump into this market and capitalize on all this volatility. For example, whatever an ounce of gold is going for, what if you had an ounce of gold that you converted into gold backs? Because as it stands right now, the new valuation for gold backs, and again, I'm going to look at the price in real time. Let's just see here what gold backs are going for right now. Gold backs are going for $8.95. So if gold backs close at over, we'll just say we can maintain. I'm going to give you a new metric to look at. What we're looking for is for gold backs to break $9. When they break $9, everyone who's able to lock in on that conversion will get $14,000 for every $1 of gold back that they're holding, but they have to be held in a UPMA account. And so you need to get with whoever would lock you in on this particular parameter to become a gold back member. Get with them so they can share with you the link. There's a special link that you want to use because they're actually giving away silverbacks in January. And these are going to be the new products that are really going to make racial playing really sizzle. So for those of you, check the ratio between gold and silver. Once you see what that is, you know what you need to be loading up on. You know from all of this rhetoric what we've been talking about when it comes to silver and where things should be. And if you've been listening long enough, you definitely should have learned something. Yes, there will be a class for those of you that are directly tied to us through our infrastructure through Bittrex. If you want to be active within that environment, get with the individual who referred you. That way we can get you into our membership, get you into our training platform so you too can be the change that you want to see. Look, I appreciate everybody's time and energy. If you got any questions, give us a call at 561-873-2125. Again, you can give us a call at, let's see, make sure I'm giving you the right number because, man, I've been, every time over the weekend, I've been kind of all over the place. But let me give you the call-in number so we're all on the same sheet of music. Let's see. Bear with me. Okay. Let's see here. Yeah, you guys should definitely get with us. Let's see. Call-in number should be where is it? I had another number that they were using. Bear with me. Trying to look it up right quick. Yeah, watch this. I think we're going to get it right here. And yeah, okay, here we go. All right, you can give us a call. We got a couple of numbers for you here. So we'll just start with the easiest number for you to definitely give us a call. We can call our corporate number at 1-888-524-3648. You can also give us a call at 561-825. Again, that's 873-2125. And also give us a call at 561-873-2125. Definitely reach out to us. Because again, we're only as strong as our weakest link. And if you know more, you can do more. These are exciting times to be alive. Please definitely become a Gold Back member today. Also establish a UPMA account. So therefore you can start taking advantage of all of this volatility that's happening in the precious metals market. With that, I look forward to seeing you in class today at 5. p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And again, if you got any calls, questions, or concerns, give us a call. 561-873-2145. With that, I'm going to say peace and love, family. Peace and love.